Leadership requires consistency. It demands clarity and the ability to follow through on commitments. Yet, what we witness today raises serious questions about both competence and constitutional boundaries. During a press conference addressing last night's military strikes on Venezuela, concerns emerged about the president's physical condition and the legal basis for this operation. This isn't about partisan criticism. This is about accountability, the rule of law, and the dangerous precedents being set for American foreign policy. The administration has now bombed more countries in its first year than any recent presidency. This represents a complete reversal of campaign promises that there would be no new wars. But the concern isn't just broken promises. It's the pattern of reckless governance we're witnessing. Let's examine what actually happened and what it means for the country.
Early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault. And it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator.
Before we break this down further, if you're finding this analysis valuable, a quick like on this video really helps. And if you want more political commentary like this, hit that subscribe button. Your support makes this content possible. These statements are now on the official record. The acknowledgement of military action without congressional approval isn't speculation. It's documented fact. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 reinforced these limits. Yet what we're seeing appears to be a deliberate strategy, not just ignoring legal requirements, but openly celebrating that defiance as strength. Just this week, members of Congress from both parties have formally questioned the constitutional basis for these strikes. This debate is happening in real time, with serious implications for the balance of power that defines American democracy. But there's a troubling pattern beyond the constitutional questions. Multiple motives appear to be driving these decisions, and none of them center on genuine national security or the well-being of American families.
With breathtaking speed, power, precision, and competence, you rarely see anything like it. You've seen some raids in this country that didn't go so well. They were an embarrassment. If you look back to Afghanistan, or if you look back to the Jimmy Carter days, they were different days. We're a respected country again, like never before.
The disconnect between words and reality has rarely been more obvious. Claims of global respect clash with the facts. Current approval ratings are at historic lows, not highs. International reactions at forums like the United Nations have been skeptical at best. But beyond these contradictions, there's something more troubling about this presentation. Multiple observers, including medical professionals, noted visible signs of distress during this address. Speech was slurred. Body language suggested exhaustion or health issues. These aren't partisan observations. They're documented concerns that raise questions about fitness for this demanding role. Americans deserve transparency about the health of their leaders. This isn't about age or politics. It's about whether the person in the highest office can safely execute their duties.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition.
Think about what was just stated. The United States is now occupying and running another sovereign nation with no end date, no timeline, no clear exit plan, no congressional debate. For those who supported America First policies, this raises an obvious question. How does occupying another country serve American interests? American families are struggling with rising costs, groceries, housing, healthcare, education. Yet resources are being diverted to what amounts to nation building in South America. The economic justification centers on oil and property claims. But this argument falls apart under scrutiny.
We have now a border where nobody gets through. In addition, Venezuela unilaterally seized and sold American oil American assets and American platforms, costing us billions and billions of dollars. They did this a while ago, but we never had a president that did anything about it. They took all of our property. It was our property. We built it. And we never had a president that decided to do anything about it. Instead, they fought wars that were 10,000 miles away. We built Venezuela oil industry with American talent, drive, and skill, and the socialist regime stole it from us during those previous administrations, and they stole it through force. This constituted one of the largest thefts of American property in the history of our country. Considered the largest theft of property in the history of our country. Massive oil infrastructure was taken like we were babies, and we didn't do anything about it. I would have done something about it. America will never allow foreign powers to rob our people or drive us back into and out of our own.
The economic argument has major problems. First, oil markets are global. Military action in Venezuela won't automatically lower gas prices. That's not how these markets work. Energy experts say this operation will likely create market chaos, not consumer relief. Second, when American families think about their financial struggles, gas isn't the main concern. It's food costs, rent, healthcare, childcare. Military action in Venezuela addresses none of these real problems. The claims about stolen American property have some historical basis, but they're being used to justify actions that don't logically follow. If property disputes justified invasion, dozens of countries could use similar excuses to attack their neighbors. This sets a profoundly dangerous precedent. And the presentation itself revealed something equally alarming about executive leadership.
Agencies, including the CIA, NSA, and NGA. We watched, we waited, we prepared.
What we just saw isn't a simple mistake. Medical experts who reviewed this footage noted troubling patterns. Swaying, stopping mid-sentence, and what appears to be falling asleep while standing. These are medical terms for observable problems that deserve attention. This matters because the president holds nuclear launch codes. This person makes instant decisions about military action affecting millions of lives. The physical and mental ability to handle these responsibilities isn't political. It's a basic requirement of the job. Recent reports suggest limited transparency about comprehensive health checks. Americans have a right to know whether their commander-in-chief is physically and mentally fit to fulfill presidential duties, especially when authorizing military force. But beyond questions of personal fitness, there's a broader strategic disaster here. By setting this precedent, that America can invade and occupy nations based on vague complaints without congressional approval, the administration has given permission to dictators worldwide. Consider the message this sends. If you're an authoritarian worried about a neighboring country, you now have an American example to point to. Russia can cite this for Ukraine. China can reference it for Taiwan. Any regional power with territorial ambitions just got rhetorical cover. This isn't speculation. Foreign policy experts across the political spectrum are already documenting how this action will be used in global politics. America's moral authority to criticize aggression has been severely damaged.
That may play differently for him than they would for a non-strongman leader. For example, I think that to the extent that this can be defined in the United States as having been an illegal action, I actually think Trump will see that as a political plus, and he will lean into that. He will not care about, not only will he not care about people saying this is illegal, he'll see that as an asset and he'll want to play that up. I also think that would-be strongmen and authoritarian leaders like to start wars. They like to start wars, I think, both for ego and sense of purpose, but also because they like the expanded powers that war tends to give leaders domestically at home against their own political opponents.
Even though he says he doesn't.
He
says that's not his thing, right? He's still jockeying for that Nobel Peace Prize nomination.
Yeah. It's hard to get a Nobel Peace Prize when you're starting wars and invading other countries. But, you know, I suppose if anybody thinks he can do it, it's probably President Trump.
One of the things that David Rode, who's with us this morning, was pointing out is that it's not clear yet, but it does seem like congressional authorization was not sought for this action. But that's par for the course, to your point, right? Donald Trump, if he thinks the law is in his way as it relates to military action, Congress is where that law is, where you bump up against that law. So he may not be as troubled by it. But this morning, we're hearing from members of Congress, we'll have some on the show, and from members of the Senate from both parties who feel that the bombing of those boats off of Venezuela was illegal, and that this may itself be illegal. That used to be relevant. That used to be a big conversation that would occupy a lot of our thought. Seems to just play a smaller role these days.
Yeah, two things. One is that I think a lot of previous presidents have broken those rules, and so we inherit from President George H.W. Bush and Pam. All right, like we inherit from George W. Bush in terms of his invasion. Right, we inherit a presidential sense of entitlement around war powers that is totally unjustified by the Constitution. This is what I wrote my first book about. But it's something that's been eroding for a long time, this idea that Congress controls whether or not we go to war. And I sincerely hope that in my lifetime we will get back to the founders' vision of who's supposed to declare war and how we're supposed to do it. But Donald Trump won't be the one to have broken that. But on a second point, Ali, I really feel like what we've seen with the boat strikes and what we've seen with the president's domestic agenda is that if he had a choice to do this within the law or a choice to do it blatantly flouting the law, he would choose the latter, because I think he thinks that makes him seem strong, and because I think he thinks that essentially doesn't just break the law in the sense of violating the law, it breaks the law in terms of its ability to constrain him in the future. And I think that this president does not feel bound by the laws established by the United States Congress, nor does he particularly feel bound by the rulings of most U.S. courts. And so I think that he'll see illegality in this case as a plus, and he will hope that the debate domestically about what he's just done is about the constitutionality of his actions, because I think he'd proudly proclaim that he's acting outside the Constitution, and hope to turn that to political capital in a sort of strongman narrative that he's so obviously enamored of in this second term.
That analysis gets to the heart of what makes this moment dangerous. This isn't just about whether one military action was legal. It's about a philosophy of governance that treats laws as obstacles to break through rather than rules to follow. The Constitution isn't optional. The separation of powers isn't outdated. These structures exist specifically to prevent unchecked power in any single branch of government. When executives from any party erode these boundaries, they weaken the protections that keep all Americans safe from tyranny. Here's what should worry every citizen. If these actions go unchallenged, they become normal. The next president from either party inherits these expanded powers. The erosion of congressional war powers didn't start with this administration, but it's accelerating dangerously. Recent polls show that most Americans, across party lines, believe Congress should have a real role in military decisions. This isn't about being pro-war or anti-war. It's about maintaining democratic accountability for decisions that send Americans into danger and commit national resources to foreign conflicts. The founders designed checks and balances because they understood that concentrated power corrupts judgment. They had experienced monarchy and rejected it deliberately. What we're seeing now tests whether those safeguards can survive an executive branch that views them as barriers rather than protections. So where does this leave us? First, we must recognize the constitutional crisis happening right now. When military force is used without congressional approval against a nation that hasn't attacked us, that's not a policy disagreement. It's a violation of the basic framework of American government. Second, we need accountability through every democratic channel available. That means congressional oversight, court challenges, and public pressure. Representatives from both parties who believe in constitutional government need to act now, not wait until it's politically safe. Third, we must see that America First rhetoric is empty when it justifies expensive, endless military occupations that don't help American families. If the goal were truly American well-being, we'd invest in infrastructure, healthcare, education, and economic opportunity, not add another country to the bombing list. Fourth, questions about presidential fitness and transparency can't be dismissed as partisan attacks. Every American deserves to know their leader is physically and mentally capable of the job, especially when that job includes authorizing deadly military force. Finally, this moment will define American foreign policy for years. The precedents set now will either be challenged and corrected, or they'll become the new normal. That's not exaggeration. That's how constitutional boundaries either hold or collapse. This isn't about supporting one party over another. This is about defending principles that matter more than politics: rule of law, democratic accountability, and constitutional government. The framers understood something basic. Power always tries to expand, and only vigilant citizens can limit it. That responsibility belongs to all of us, regardless of who we voted for.